welcome to this budget special of ET Now Startup Central, where we have got you the top voices from the world of unicorn startups, investment, to really give you a 360-degree perspective of what the expectations are from the upcoming budget from a startup perspective, particularly after remonetization, which has given a huge impetus for digital payments. Joining us on the panel today, we have Kunal Bahl, the co-founder and CEO of Snapdeal. For an investor perspective, we have Avnish Bajaj of Matrix Partners. Remember, some of his notable investments include the likes of Ola, Practo, Stayzilla. We also have Preet Singh, the co-founder and CEO of MobiKwik, one of the biggest beneficiaries as far as demonetization is concerned. Thank you all so much for joining us on this special show. Kunal, I want to start with you. Your broad expectations from this budget. What does the government need to do to create a more predictable, stable and friendly investment climate?
I think over the last 1 year, it is very clear that this government has done more than most governments in the past would have probably done around creating a more favorable environment. I meet global investors all the time, both in India and outside India when I travel, and the euphoria that exists for India at a macro level, I have never seen this in the last 5, 7, 8, 10 years since the time we've been running this business. And that's up and down the ladder in terms of type of investor, from sovereign wealth funds to hedge funds to private equity investors. I think everyone sees there is a positive, there's a positive path and a positive trajectory our country is in. I think this there's obviously an expectation around taxation and tax rates coming down. This budget, we don't know whether it will happen or not. But if that happens, I think it will suddenly create a surge of liquidity amongst consumers, which should significantly impact positively the consumption in India, especially for retail and some of the related sectors.
Over to you, Avnish, then. What are your broad expectations from the budget, from an investor perspective? In some of India's unicorns, some of the notable startups, what are your expectations?
There are two hopes from the budget. One is a bit selfish and one is broader. I think the broader one is that the sentiment has been negatively affected. There's a lot of support for demonetization, but the reality is there's a lot of choking that has happened because of the execution of it. Things that improve sentiment, again, classic Adam Smith animal spirits point. I think the animal spirits in India are dampened. They were dampened for the last 2 years. Private capex was still not picking up, and now you've had a consumer sentiment dampened with this move. Anything that lifts sentiment, even if it is by saying, okay, we are cutting taxes by this much, or corporate taxation, it's rumored to come down to 25% in a shorter time frame, those things will help. So I'm more looking at the sentiment and the unlocking of the animal spirits rather than any particular move. In terms of selfish, we are private investors. We believe we take more risk. We believe we create more innovation. Yet when we exit, we are taxed higher than if somebody invests in a public market stock where the long-term tax is zero. So there is government effort to bring in some parity. Well, actually first some clarity with regard to Mauritius and double taxation avoidance. But I do think it is important for private company taxation to be brought in line with publicly listed. In fact, should be more beneficial than publicly listed transactions. And right now it's exactly the opposite.
We've had a unicorn and an investor perspective, but who better than Preet Singh to really give us the fintech angle on all this? Preet Singh, we're just a few weeks here after remonetization. The budget too is expected to have a lot of thrust as far as digital is concerned. What are your own expectations as far as the union budget is concerned?
So overall, I think given that demonetization has happened, about 2 months ago, I think there is a strong need for the government to invest into infrastructure, especially internet and wireless infrastructure. Our country lags behind most Asian economies in the consumption of internet as well as in the availability of internet. If you go to some of the top cities in Asia, and I've been traveling recently, you get free Wi-Fi almost everywhere. I think there has to be provisions to encourage more investments into this area, because clearly, though we have a few 100 million people who are intermittently active on internet, there is a strong need to get 500-600 million people. If you want them to start using digital payments, move away from cash to a less cash society, the first thing that they need is to have accessible internet. And I think that does not only mean infrastructure, it also means encouraging more consumption in terms of, for example, taking care of language specific issues, because beyond the top 100-150 million people in this country, we don't have a lot of people who can understand English that easily. So there has to be a strong focus on investment into development of something around all the different non-English languages in India, which has been lagging behind when we compare it to some of the other countries like China.
Kunal, drilling down to the specifics here, what are the 2 or 3 things that really need to be done purely from a startup ecosystem perspective this budget? I mean, we have completed 1 year of Startup India, a lot of initiatives in the last year, but 2 or 3 urgent things that you think still need to be addressed and which can be done in the upcoming budget.
I think one of the biggest things that we need to do is significantly grow internet connectivity and the quality of internet connectivity in India. And if there's one thing I think the government should seriously consider doing, is expanding the Wi-Fi footprint in India. Most countries of the world are seeing massive usage and adoption of internet through Wi-Fi, whether it's the US or China or many other parts of the world. India right now is grossly underpenetrated on the Wi-Fi side, and maybe the government should take an approach that Wi-Fi is like India Post, which is it just should be universally available, or at least available to the extent in high density consumer locations. I feel that will create a significant surge in the overall digital economy in India, and that is infrastructure that probably only the government can step up and deploy.
Right. Kunal, broadly from startups specifically to the sector that you're in, e-commerce, again, the GST bill has thrown up some unfavorable provisions as far as e-commerce companies are concerned. IMAI has flagged off some concerns as far as this is concerned in terms of the cost this will add to e-commerce companies going forward. What really needs to be done from the GST perspective? What are the concerns that the government needs to address as far as e-commerce companies are concerned?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 or 3 areas that are of some concern in the current GST proposals. One is the tax deduction at source. I think if e-commerce companies start doing tax deduction at source, we probably need a pretty large workforce just reconciliating taxation of the hundreds of thousands of sellers and small businesses on our platform. I think that's completely untenable for us as technology companies. It's not the business we are in or are good at. Secondly, there is obviously a big mismatch between the fact that we are going from a origin-based taxation regime to a destination-based taxation regime, and we have hundreds of thousands of sellers who are shipping products and selling products to consumers across all the states of India, and the combinations of that will create a completely brain-wrecking extent of complexity for us, which again for our sellers would be very, very untenable, and essentially create significant impact of a negative kind on the e-commerce business. But on all these factors, I think there is an engagement going on with the government, and we haven't heard any signals that are negative. I think the government's motivated to make sure that e-commerce as a sector continues to see an upward trajectory.
Avnish, away from GST to the other big issue boiling in the startup ecosystem, which is really this Desi versus Videsi debate. I dare say your own portfolio company, Ola, was the one that perhaps started this debate, with its CEO's comments on capital dumping. Where do you stand on this, and what can the government do as far as creating a level playing field is concerned?
Yeah, so first of all, I think you well know that Bhavish was quoted out of context and he's not lived that one down. He was not asking for protectionism, he was asking for a level playing field. Let me give you my view. My view is there is a carrot and stick approach in general in life for most things. Protectionism is on the stick side of it. I don't personally believe in it. I do believe though that carrot should be offered. For example, if you look at airlines, it's for the longest period been considered a very, very strategic sector where foreign direct investment should be limited, or it's some kind of a national security implications are there. I believe certain businesses should be considered strategic and carrots should be provided. If the government would provide incentives to the local companies to say, hey, for example, in the case of the transportation business, if there is a government utility like a metro or a railways, Indian companies will get beneficial treatment. I think that is absolutely fair. I mean, right now even the United States is talking about protectionism, so everybody looks out for themselves. And I think while I'm a big believer in free market capitalism, we need to recognize that our entrepreneurs can rub shoulders and can measure up to the best ones in the world. And to the extent that we give them a level playing field, we will be spawning thousands more in the future, so we should be encouraging it.
Where do you stand on this whole capital dumping argument?
So I think that in capitalism, capital is important. So I think that is anyway is going to be part of the game of building business, whether you build it in India or anywhere else. However, what the capital gets used for, there has to be some sanctity around that. Especially, I am not very favorable of this whole capital being used just to buy customers using discounts and cashbacks, as has been done and continues to be done. I feel that users now have enough of an incentive, and all the businesses, merchants have enough of an incentive to move away from cash, especially after demonetization. Enough awareness has been created. So this is something that should definitely be looked at. Secondly, I think in terms of the payments ecosystem in India, we should have competition, we should have strong players, and it should not be that foreign owned entities or foreign run entities only end up dominating because of the fact that they can invest 500-600 million into doing irrational things like discounts and cashbacks. The ecosystem should provide for multiple protocols, multiple companies to compete.
Kunal, we heard out Avnish and Bipin. Both of them seem to agree that a lot more needs to be done in this respect, that capital dumping is a genuine concern. Would you agree with this concern? Where do you stand on this whole issue? And, is there some way this can be institutionalized by the government? Because if you look at the internet space, the regulations right now are pretty ambiguous. So critics believe that MNCs find it easier to perhaps skirt around the ambiguity. What do you think the government needs to do in this perspective?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm not a policy expert. I think that's for the government to decide as to who they would like to allow to play in India, who they would disallow, and on what principle. I think as companies, we have to do our best at executing. We have to do our best to attract capital and high quality investors and build high quality teams. At the end of the day, the best execution should win.
Avnish, the other area of concern is, of course, the cab aggregation space, where rules keep changing every day in every state. You're one of the earliest investors in Ola. So what really needs to be done here? I mean, people often say that regulation will always follow technology as far as startups are concerned. But is there more that the government can do? Because cab aggregators seem to be living, in India, where rules pretty much keep changing every day. So what sort of clarity needs to come here?
So I would say the one place where I would say the Indian government has done a great job is to stay out of the internet and technology sector, and therefore the sector has done very well. That said, yes, you are right. At some stage, regulation or guidelines should follow. I would say the government has done a pretty good job. The central government, and specifically I'll call out Mr. Gadkari, is very progressive. So the guidelines that have come out have been in consultation with all parties. I think I haven't gone into the details. What I hear is they're pretty constructive and balancing consumer interests and business interests. Some of the practices in the industry, we are well aware. It has happened in e-commerce. It has happened in cab aggregation about crazy subsidies and discounts. There's a question mark around should that be regulated. Today a driver is making 1 lakh, 2 lakhs because of competitive wars, and tomorrow when the war is over it becomes 20,000. It affects people's lives. So I think in the public interest, some of those things which I believe China has done correctly would be interesting, and that's not in favor of one player, it's for the industry. The state and city level issues in the transportation sector are actually the ones where there is an issue.
Kunal, there's been a lot of debate on whether the government will take up specific initiatives to encourage digital payments, to basically disincentivize people from using cash. Do you believe there will be more incentives to encourage digital payments? Do you believe that this should be done to really keep the remonetization exercise going?
Yeah, I think one of the things I feel is that all utility payments in India, because that's a recurring monthly payment that everyone makes, whether it's for your water, whether it's your electricity, fuel the government's already taken care of. But there are many recurring monthly payments which are 99% today done offline in mostly and largely in cash, some in check as well. All of these are far more convenient and far cheaper from a cash management perspective to do online. And for instance, on FreeCharge, with one button, you can pay your electricity bill. And for years, I know we've had to stand in line to go pay our electricity bill. Now, the government should give some incentive for consumers to start adopting it. And these incentives don't need to be perpetual in nature. These incentives can be for a period of 1 year, for instance, as habits get created. Because I know for a fact that once a consumer starts paying their utility bills, which are, brainless, recurring monthly payments that you just have to make, once they start making these payments online, once, twice, thrice, there is no way they are ever going offline to pay those bills again, even if there is no incentive.
Bipin, Kunal's clearly pushing for more incentives on that line. I'm sure you'll agree, but more than that, the greater concern has been, no doubt UPI apps have seen huge traction in the last couple of months. Wallets such as yours, such as Paytm, have really reaped rich rewards. But of late, there's been this huge war, so to speak, brewing between the big banks and UPI apps. I mean, you saw how the issue between ICICI Bank and PhonePe is playing out. So from that respect, what really needs to be done to bring more clarity to the space? Anything that will, allow these UPI apps to operate freely, that will sort of lead to some understanding between them and banks?
That's a very good question you asked. Clearly, the way I see today UPI, and some of the other, newer initiatives are in a bit of a confusing state, simply because a push has been made at all levels to promote digital payments, including UPI, including, wallets. But in cases of, for example, banks, which are the traditional payment operators in this country, they continue to hold disproportionate power and exercise that power, as you mentioned in the case of the recent face-offs, but also partly due to the fact that the role of different entities, including banks, private players, non-banks, has not been made very clear as part of this regulation. So I think there is a clear need to set up very clear guidelines or rules by which you can play in the world of digital payments as far as India is concerned, and that's clearly missing. There are multiple different things happening, but there is no single, for example, regulator for payments today.
Avnish, I'm going to let you have the last word. One common refrain that we hear before every union budget is, how the angel tax needs to be done away with. But from an investor perspective, what does the government need to do to encourage more domestic capital? We often hear complaints about how, Indian startups are so reliant on capital coming from the US, from Europe, now, China and the East. But when are we really going to see purse strings opening up from domestic corporations? What does the government need to do in this respect?
So angel tax, I believe it was a mistake. I think it's been acknowledged as a mistake. It was done to supposedly prevent money laundering of some sort. I don't understand exactly how. So that I believe will be reversed, should be reversed. In terms of encouraging local investment, I think it's a very big and important issue. I don't believe you need incentives beyond the fact that you invest in a company and it's a great company, you'll make a lot of money. That said, like I was saying earlier, the taxation of that is worse than investing in publicly listed companies. That should not be the case. If anything, it should be more favorable, right? 0% tax in public markets or 10% depending on when you sell versus 22 or 33% depending on when you sell in private. That's a problem. The other piece that the government should do, it has been debated forever, is a sovereign fund. What China has done well is once the sovereign pushes some of the institutional investments. Now LIC, by the way, has started doing it, GIC has started doing it, some of these guys have started doing it. But if the sovereign was there, like China has multiple ones including China Investment Corp, that gives a certain level of legitimacy. When that fund comes in as an anchor, Canada has a big pension fund and so on and so forth. So some of those, there was this new pension scheme. New pension scheme is, the great thing is it was allowed to invest in publicly listed companies. Now imagine some of that becoming allocated and managed professionally, but allocated to private investments also. I think that would have a great positive domino effect.
Thanks so much all of you for joining us, Kunal, Avnish and Bipin Preet Singh. I couldn't have asked for a better panel to really give us a complete 360-degree view of what startups expect, what investors expect, what the big unicorns in this country expect from the upcoming budget. With that, we come to the end of the special pre-budget show edition of Startup Central on ET Now. Thanks so much for watching.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.